Welcome back to the Mind Gut Conversation. Today, my guest is Dan Buettner, best-selling author, explorer, storyteller, longevity researcher, Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker, and three-time Guinness World Record holder for long-distance cycling. Dan's name is synonymous with the Blue Zones concept and its practical implementations in several U.S. cities. Today's episode discusses what is the secret behind the blue zones, why people in the US are living longer while at the same time struggling with an epidemic of chronic diseases. What are Dan's thoughts about the growing number of influencers and biohackers that are promoting pills like rapamycin or metformin for longevity, and much more? Welcome to the show, Dan. And it's a real pleasure talking to you today. I've been waiting for this for a long time. And I would like to, there's a lot of things we could talk about. You're a pretty amazing individual with, which I'll start in a minute with all your accomplishments. And yeah, we can go through a wide range of topics in this conversation. So let me start out with this, which has really impressed me the most about you. So you've made amazing achievements in a wide range of areas, including being a best-selling author, explorer, storyteller, longevity researcher, Emmy award-winning documentary filmmaker, and particularly three-time Guinness World Record holder for long-distance cycling. I didn't know about this. Which one of these achievements are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of having written the cover story for National Geographic on Blue Zones, which is one of its best-selling issues in its 100-plus year history. And the reason is because, as a young explorer, the Academy Awards, so to speak, of exploration was to make it to National Geographic. And the first article I wrote ended up on the cover, and it was a big success. And I'm very proud of that, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I can't help, mentioning, starting with the term blue zones. So your name is really synonymous with the blue zones concept, and you have received 3 Emmy Awards for your Netflix miniseries Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones, which you co-produced and were featured in. And from the time that you first reported on communities with increased longevity in this cover story for National Geographic magazine, has your view of the factors determining longevity in these regions of the world changed?
Yes. The idea about 25 years ago was to, in a sense, reverse engineer longevity, knowing that only about 15% of how long we live as a collective is dictated by our genes. 85% is something else. I reasoned that if I could find areas where people are living measurably longest, you have people who achieve the outcome we want. Now let's just find out what they've done. And that was the whole idea behind Blue Zones. And more than just reporting on them, I found them. I found most of them. Gianni Pez and Michel Poulin found the Sardinian Blue Zone, and the Wilcox brothers found Okinawa. But I was the one that found the other 3 and sort of pulled the concept together as an international concept. And there's another Blue Zone in Ikaria, Greece, 4th one in Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, and then among the Seventh-day Adventists. And when I started, I hoped I'd find a compound, coral calcium or something that explained longevity. And what most surprised me was the real secret to longevity is what literally everybody misses. We are on a quest for a pill or a supplement or a genetic intervention that's going to make us live longer. But the big idea in populations where people actually live longer, they do so because they live in environments where their day-to-day, moment-to-moment micro decisions on what they eat, how they move, how they connect, how they socialize, are slightly better because of kind of the Adam Smith silent hand forces. And that was what was really interesting. And now built an entire company based on that insight called Blue Zones LLC.
Yeah, that's right. I had a personal experience a long time ago before I, thought about this in scientific terms. I think it was early part of my medical school training and did this backpacking trip through South America for 2 months. And together with a friend, we climbed a lot of mountains on the way. But we also went to this valley, which I think was featured in the National Geographic. I forgot the name now. I think it was in.
I can tell you, it was Ecuador's Vilcabamba Valley.
Actually, yeah, exactly.
That's been debunked, and we in fact checked it out, and there's no dependable birth records here, so it's all hearsay. And people, if they don't really have their records, uniformly they exaggerate their age. So we've eliminated that as a blue zone.
Oh, this is really interesting because, you know, we had kind of a funny experience there because everybody was trying to show off. And one old man, I mean, he must have been old, you know, went with us climbing a mountain and carrying a big tree.
Yeah, he's probably 29.
Yeah. So yeah, this was my first encounter with longevity, you know, and then people have built hotels there, and you know, supposedly the whole thing has vanished. Really, I mean, these old people have died, and it's turned into a tourist resort area where people think they're going to find the secret to long life. And
You know that we spent 3 years just confirming, verifying ages, birth records, and death records. So there's a lot of fake blue zones out there, but the 5 that we found, we fastidiously checked birth registry, birth records, cross-reference them with baptismal certificates. Same thing with death, and it's a lot of work. But before you emulate a population, you want to make darn sure they're extraordinary, that they're really living a long time, or they're suffering low rates of chronic disease, or some other dimension that the rest of us are aspiring to.
so, I mean, just to summarize this, so it's the lifestyle. It's definitely not the genes that play the major role, even though some people say that the centenarians, the people that make it over 90 or over 100, that the genes start playing a bigger role. I don't know how well this is supported by science, but you would say that the lifestyle, different components of lifestyle, and different combinations.
Well, I'll give you generalization, and then I'll come back to the overarching. So they're mostly eating a whole food, plant-based diet. Yeah, basically a gut-friendly diet. They're eating whole grains, greens and garden vegetables, tubers like sweet potatoes, nuts as a snack, and the cornerstone of every blue zone diet in the world is beans. They do eat meat, but compared to our 220 pounds per year of meat, they eat about 20 pounds of meat. So that meat's a celebratory food. Some really fermented cheeses, high quality, high flavor cheeses, but not a lot. Not a lot of fish. They do eat. They do consume wine, though, which is kind of inconvenient for these people who want to make a blanket statement about alcohol. But wine is definitely part of the blue zone diet in most blue zones. They tend to live in extended families, so they have some social insulation there. They tend to have vocabulary for purpose that could be worth up to 8 years of life expectancy. They live in walkable communities with gardens, so they're moving naturally all the time. They tend to belong to a faith. This is the general componentry. But the big insight, once again, is they live in environments where they're not tempted by the sodas and the salty snacks and the packaged sweets and all the crap that that we eat in America. Their cheapest and most accessible foods are peasant foods. They know how to make them taste delicious. The best entertainment is usually each other, so they're always out and about connecting. They live in a place where almost nobody has cars, so they're walking everywhere. So the central tenet, I argue, if you want to live longer, don't try to change your behavior because you'll fail. It fails for almost all people, almost all the time, whether it's a diet, an exercise program, a supplement regimen, whatever. If you look at the data, they all fail in a year or two. If you want to live longer, change your environment. And most of what I write about for blue zones is how you can shape your home, your workplace, your social circle, your bedroom, your kitchen, so that you mindlessly move more, eat less, socialize more, and live out your purpose. And that's what makes a difference.
I didn't initially plan to ask you that, but another sort of experience I had in early in medical school that I was able to participate in a documentary film expedition to the Yanomami on the Upper Orient,
Cool.
which was, and we lived with them for in their Shabono in their village for I mean, by the time we got there, it was about 2 months. And again, at the time, I didn't really have a scientific interest in longevity, but just observing and filming and looking at these pictures, their social life, very intimate. The family is playing with their kids, the father is playing with their kids, and um, a lot of natural physical activity by collecting the tubers in the forest, having a minimal meat intake, even though they were surrounded by big animals. The main meat came from birds and from fish. So in some ways, I mean, do you think this, like what you find in your blue zones has something to do with, was related in some ways to the ancestral lifestyle that our bodies are optimized for?
Yes. Uh, for the most part, they were living a traditional lifestyle. They were living a lifestyle very similar to that of their grandparents. So, what you have in blue zones is a bit of a sweet spot. So, they were born late enough to benefit from antibiotics and vaccinations. So, they beat infectious disease. What killed most humans until about 1930 was infectious diseases: cholera, dysentery, gangrene. You step on a nail and it could have been fatal, or often fatal, in fact. Diarrhea for little kids. Thanks to vaccinations and antibiotics, we've mostly beaten that. But then a new scourge replaced it, and that's that of chronic disease. So, beginning in about 1960, especially 1970, our food supply morphs into one that is today largely processed or highly ultra processed foods. And those are and our relative lack of movement, those are driving type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, about 40% of cancers, dementia. People in blue zones live in places where the American diet really was very late to arrive, and cars and mechanized conveniences were late to arrive. So they had the benefits of vaccinations and public health, essentially. So they were not dying of infectious disease, and they also had a diet and lifestyle and environment that promoted health. So these people, as far as we know, live out the capacity of the human machine better than anybody else, which really adds up to about 13 or 14 more years, good years, than the average American gets.
Yeah, so I mean that brings me to another puzzle that look forward to get your answer for. So as you know, the number of centenarians has been increasing significantly in the US and other places in the world. It's a global trend. And if you look at the highest absolute numbers, it's the US is, I think it's number one, China and Japan, being number two and three. This is at a time where we're dealing with this epidemic of chronic non-contagious diseases. How do you think that's explainable?
Well, we have a medical system that focuses on keeping sick people alive.
Mm,
So in the past, when these people are today making it to 100, they wouldn't have survived. That's a lot of them. Uh, yeah. Plus, there's just more people. The U.S. population's up to 350 million people, and that's uh, yeah, I think that's sixfold from when I was born.
mm.
So naturally, just more people, you get more centenarians. So it's not the best barometer of health, quite honestly, um, because the most important statistic to look at if you want to know how healthy your population is called health adjusted life expectancy, which is a calculation done by the Global Burden of Disease.
Mhm.
And Americans can only expect about 64 years of life in full health, and then they can expect major disability or chronic disease to be beleaguering their lives. And there's many places. In my Netflix series, Live to 100, I profile Singapore, where the average person is making it to 76 in full health.
Mhm.
That's what we want.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, I was in Singapore after having watched your Netflix series, and it's interesting, a city of that density that you would think is extremely stressful, and unhealthy. Like you see these areas where it's different. I mean, how the interaction of people and the public spaces, and I mean, in Singapore, what do you think the main factor is? I mean, I always hate to pin things down to one factor because life and
It's
biology.
an enlightened leadership. It's leaders who are proactively proposing and passing policies that favor health as opposed to favoring sickness and then making money off of fixing that sickness. So Lee Kuan Yew, the mentor minister who sort of got things going and stocked his cabinet with MIT and Harvard graduate who look at the numbers, and they saw that smoking was robbing years of good life from people. So they made smoking very expensive and very unattractive. They understood that sugar is a major driver of obesity, so that sugar is now taxed. And if you want to sell Coca-Cola in Singapore, it has about 30% less sugar than that same Coca-Cola you buy in Great Britain. So they've very smartly made driving very expensive and inconvenient, and made their subway system very cheap, efficient, and attractive. So what that's done is it's gotten people out from behind their steering wheel, out on their feet. About 90% of Singaporeans do not own a car, but
Mhm.
everybody uses their wonderful transport system. And we're so fixated on our cars, and so it's my right to drive. Well, yeah, that right may indeed be your right, but on the other hand, it also explains or helps explains why 70% of us are obese. More people have died in car accidents than all the wars combined. And we now know that air pollution is a major driver of chronic disease. So there's enormous costs that the Singaporean government have taken into account and passed policies accordingly. And lo and behold, they're living longer, healthier, and they have one of the best economies in the history of the world.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, our current government is sort of coined this term "Make America Healthy Again." So you would think same kind of intention, but instead of having MIT and Harvard graduates guiding these processes, you have basically the Fox News hosts running it and pretending they know what they're doing. Uh, so, I mean, are you partially optimistic that this MAHA movement is going in the right direction, or is this just?
There's glimmers of hope. There's RFK kind of going after the soda companies and the big food producers. There's a little glimmer of hope. Whether or not he follows through and really takes on big food is another question that we'll see. Make America healthy again. I'm not aware of a time when America was really healthy, at least on an international level. Um, even though we're unhealthy right now, um, life expectancy is still going up, not
Yeah.
fast, but it's still going up. So, what are we going back to 1860? When are we going back to healthy again? It's just one of these slogans that people don't think through.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think one of the most exciting things that you have been doing is this creating and implementing this Blue Zone project. So with the insights gained from your observations around the world of blue zones, to sort of try to transform programs in the U.S. and make cities or areas bring them to the same level of health promoting behavior. Can you mention some of the successes of this effort?
Yes, Fort Worth, Texas, almost 1 million people. We lowered their obesity rate by 3% over a 5-year period, while the rest of Texas got heavier. The beach cities of Los Angeles, we lowered their obesity rate by about 15%, while the rest of California got heavier. We reduced smoking. And we did it not by coming in and telling people what to do or scolding them or guilting them. We simply worked with their city council to pass policies that favor healthy food over junk food and junk food marketing, that favored the pedestrian over the motorist, that favored the non-smoker over the smoker, and not trying to, ramrod any one policy, but showing them policy menus that have worked elsewhere, and then work with them to choose the feasible and effective policies for their city, and then help them get them passed. And then we have a Blue Zone certification award for restaurants, grocery stores, workplaces, schools, and churches who upgrade their policies and their designs. And again, it's all in service of kind of the invisible hand, setting Americans up for success when it comes to their decisions. Right now, we're set up for failure.
We've talked about a little bit about this before. There's obviously several lifestyle factors that have been associated with increased longevity, from regular physical exercise, social interactions, eudaimonia, healthy sleep, and obviously diet, and then to a small degree, genes. Do you think that the relative importance of these factors vary between different people? So let's say individual A benefits primarily from the first and the second, and but doesn't adhere to, and individual B doesn't adhere to these, but does something else that's beneficial.
That's on the margin, and sort of customized medicine. I think it's a bad investment. We know with a very high degree of certainty that eating a whole food, mostly plant-based, is going to give an average American about 10 extra years of life expectancy. The effect of a healthy diet is about 10 times greater than the effect of just exercise. In other words, you can't exercise a bad diet away. But if you have a really good diet and you don't get as much exercise as you should, you're still going to be better off than the reverse. So, my business is looking at populations to get populations healthier, and then I let people, as far as individual, what's right for them, they can make those decisions. But I just, I know I can get a lot done and save a lot of money if I can make the healthy choice the easy choice for 98% of people out there.
So your own diet, have you always had a largely plant-based diet, or was there a point in your life where you decided the evidence is just too strong, that this is the best thing you can do for your health and longevity?
I started weaning off of meat about 30 years ago. And then with the Blue Zone work, it's very clear that people living a long time eat meat very sparingly. It's sort of a condiment, not the main, sort of that little thing. Maybe in a stew, there's a piece of meat the size of a marshmallow or something to give it flavor, or a bone or something like that. And then maybe once a month, there's a big pig out, barbecue roast or something like that. But I don't need meat. So if I come over to your house and you made a big wonderful meal and it includes meat, I'll take a bite to be polite, but I'm not. I largely avoid it. There's almost no living in America. There's almost no health argument or cogent health argument for eating meat.
Yeah, I mean, you're always welcome to come over to our house, but you would not have to.
Ha 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 ha.
You would not have to worry about the meat because we have sort of gravitated probably the same time period over the last 30 years to a not 100%, but a largely 75 to 80% plant-based diet, and the meat comes only from seafood and poultry.
That's why you're so healthy.
So coming to a topic that always annoys me tremendously, and I'm amazed. I think this can only happen in the United States with internet influencers. This whole craziness about biohacking and um, taking medications that have been shown in mice to prolong life. And um, there's big symposia on this, and some very prominent people are sort of living in that space. Do you think there's anything to that? I mean, that is either necessary or useful for people to even consider that?
In a word, no. There's $83 billion anti-aging industry, and it has failed to produce even one supplement or genetic intervention or serum or stem cell or that has been shown to reverse, stop, or even slow aging in humans. There's some theoretical suggestion they work, but the popular ones are rapamycin and metformin. We don't know the longevity dose. If you're taking them, it's just a guess
Yeah,
that
yes.
you're taking the right amount or the right frequency, because there's never been a trial in humans. Now, if you have type 2 diabetes, metformin probably not a bad idea, but not if you're healthy.
Yeah.
So, and on the other hand, I applaud the innovation because, nobody knew nobody knew the idea of antibiotics really in 1920. And, it was a pioneering scientist named Fleming who stumbled upon um, penicillin and probably saved more human lives than any person in the history of the world. If you're not out trying things and testing them, you're not going to innovate. I just don't think we should be testing on humans, and you certainly shouldn't be testing on yourself. I always say, if you're dying to take a supplement and you want to live longer, take 125 beans a day, and that's got the best evidence of any other supplement that I know. Cup of beans a day is associated with about 4 extra years of life expectancy.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. Most people still consider beans sort of a not the prime type of food that they want to, when you have guests over, you don't want to serve beans, or it's sort of looked down upon. Yeah, it's really interesting that the healthiest, and a lot of people in the world live off these, like in dal, this dal in India, you know, millions, hundreds of millions of people live off that food, and um,
They're healthy. I
yeah,
just wrote a book called The Blue Zone Kitchen One Pot Meal. And I know we're never going to get Americans healthy unless we get them cooking at home. Every time you go out to eat, you consume about 250 extra calories of food, and those calories are laden with saturated fat and sodium and ultra processed food. If you can learn how to eat at home with these simple, basically peasant ingredients, and make them taste delicious, and they're cheap and they're fast, that's the best thing you can do for your health. And this Blue Zone Kitchen one pot meals, we work with Stanford. We scraped 650,000 recipes from top websites. We isolated all the recipes with 100 or more 5-star reviews, and then examined the ingredients. And we found 7 flavor patterns that we know Americans love. And we used that to make 100 recipes to live to 100. And, I know it's sort of tooting my own horn, but the book's coming out next month, September. And I think if you really want to live longer, take some time with your family, learn how to cook a half a dozen of those recipes, and make it part of your routine. Um, and your chance of chronic disease will drop if all you're eating right now is mostly standard American diet.
yeah. So I'm glad you brought this up. I'm definitely going to be one of the first people who are going to take a look at this book, and I love your practical implementations of your knowledge, I mean, both in terms of creating these blue zones in the US, and also, I mean, this recipe book sounds like an amazing idea, and I'm sure it's going to be very popular as well. I have a couple more questions. So, just in general, do you think is a desirable goal if the world is populated by older and older people living to their hundreds, requiring more and more expensive healthcare system support, and at the same time, loneliness and isolation is increasing in many parts of the world? Like, Japan, for example, the former Surgeon General called it an epidemic of loneliness. Do you think this is something that worries you? And I have to say, as a personal experience, we went to Hawaii. So we usually go to Hawaii like close to the holiday season, but last year we went there in the summer. In the holiday season, you see all the young couples with their kids, and it's a really lively atmosphere. And when we went there in summer, it's a totally different audience. It's people in their really sick looking. It's hard to estimate the age because they look elderly, but it's certainly taking away. So we decided we're not going to go there anymore at this time of the year. It just takes away the kind of the joy of being in a lively place full of energy and activity. I mean, based on what you've been saying and teaching, the future doesn't necessarily have to be like this. I mean, this doesn't have to be people that are all on walkers and crouched over and bad posture and obese. And it doesn't have to, old age doesn't have to be like this.
Yeah. So in America, we spend $4.9 trillion a year, and about 85% of that is spent on keeping sick people alive. So that's why you get this population you're describing. In blue zones, they live in an environment and in many cases, a government that spends most of its GDP dollars, their health GDP dollars, on keeping people healthy in the first place. And in that second, the blue zone scenario, you end up getting people in their 70s and 80s who are still productive. Their minds are still sharp. In most cases, they still have some jobs, so they're actively contributing to the economy. And we just have it so back asswards here in the United States that, so if you ask me, am I worried about an America that's filling up with centenarians? Yes, because we're doing it wrong. In blue zones, in true blue zones, am I worried about blue zones filling up with centenarians? No, because they're living joyous lives and contributing back, and typically very compressed morbidity, dying very quickly at the end of their lives, and leaving most of their money left over for their heirs instead of spending it on long-term care and hospice stays. So, two very different worlds.
I mean, I love your answer to this, and obviously couldn't agree more with it. For us, it was a shocking experience. Quite honestly, I mean, to see that at firsthand, it's like you read about it, but when you see it, it's really shocking. Last question: Is there a relationship, in your opinion, between longevity and happiness?
It's like this. If you pull happiness out of the equation, longevity falls, and if you pull health out of the equation, happiness falls. They're inextricably linked. And in more specific terms, if you can manage your life so you move from the least happy 20% to the most happy 20%, it adds about 6 years to your life expectancy. Happy people are more resilient to disease. They're less lonely. You don't have to worry about that. They typically tend to be healthy. I mean, more physically active. So that's the beauty of blue zones. People in blue zones are, it's not a coincidence that the happiest place on the planet is Costa Rica, at least by some measures, and the longest lived corner of the planet is Nicoya, Costa Rica. The blue zone way of longevity is not only making it to 90 or 100, but making sure the journey is enjoyable.
Great. Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks so much for taking the time to go through these questions. It was really illuminating to me and hopefully to many of our viewers. Do you have a copy of your book that you could show? Otherwise, I'll just.
I don't have a copy yet, but it's called The Blue Zone Kitchen One Pot. And also, if you like longevity, delicious longevity food, in the freezer section of your grocery store, we have Blue Zone Kitchen, formulated for longevity, with a maniacal focus on deliciousness. And if you have any questions that we didn't get to today, you can direct message me at Dan Buettner on Instagram, at Dan Buettner, or danbuettner.com. So there I am.
Great. I'm sure a lot of people will follow your advice. Yeah. Thanks again, Dan.
All right. It was really a joy to meet you.
Okay.
All right.
Same here. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.